Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. David Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new teen therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. David is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, David.
Hello,
Dave, I guess. And hello, Michael.
Hello. So, welcome to episode 169. We're going to be talking about social anxiety with our special guest, Michael Simpson. And just a shout out to Rhonda, who is not here today, but many thanks to the great work she's done. And I am humbled to be in her shoes for a couple of podcasts here. So let me turn it over to you, David, to get us started.
Well, we're going to kind of fly by the seat of our pants, which is something that Dave told us to do, make them more spontaneous.
I'm an advocate of pant flying.
Yeah, that's right. So we're gonna do that today, and Michael is going to be talking about social anxiety, his own, and the social anxiety and anxiety that many of you may be struggling with. And so, why don't you just start us off here, Michael?
Sure. Thank you for having me on. It's a privilege to be here. I'll start a little bit about how this all came to be. I have a marketing, consulting, and web practice, and I reached out to David about 4 months ago.
Yeah. And can I say how?
Sure, yeah.
Michael is, just to give you a little PR here, one of New York's top experts in web design and marketing, and really kind of a really neat, fun friend, but a high-powered specialist. And Michael sent me, you sent me a little video showing why my website was so sucky. And it was just, I think about 6 fatal flaws in my website, which I instantly recognized to be true. And I had a friend here who was a kind of an expert business person, and he said, well, why don't we get this guy on a Skype call and, see if he's for real or whatever. And so we called Michael, and my friend was grilling Michael and suddenly realized Michael's the real thing. And then we asked, well, how much would it cost to have you redo the website? And I'm thinking, probably $30,000 or something like that. And then Michael said the price was even steeper.
Yeah, steeper at $0. And the sort of sequence of events that led me to that call was, I've been struggling with some version of social anxiety I don't know when it really started, but it became really came to my awareness in the last couple of years. I probably have been suffering for quite a long time before then. But I saw a few therapists in New York. I found them to be, the ones that I found were overpriced, like $350 an hour for 45 minutes. And I did it, and for the amount of money I was paying, I felt like I was getting pretty minimal impact. But at the same time, I was always reading and researching, because there's tons of great material on the internet about social anxiety, because it's quite a widespread phenomenon, and there's all sorts of ways that people have successfully navigated their way through it. And then I got turned on to CBT.
That's cognitive behavior therapy.
That's cognitive behavior therapy, which is what David practices, but it's his version of it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I helped create cognitive behavioral therapy, and then it's morphed down into teen CBT, which is, we don't need to focus on that today. But
and I read his book, When Panic Attacks, which, if you're suffering from any form of anxiety, whether it's social or general or just any form of nervousness, or even if you're not, to be honest, you should read it. And I remember I read that book and I was like, wow, this is so good. And he didn't ask me to say this. He didn't ask me to say this, but it's so good. And because, yeah, like I say, I'd read a lot of CBT books before, and I got the general gist. But then David had all these words for ways that I was feeling, like approval addiction and a bunch of other ones. If you look at the self-defeating beliefs,
perceived perfectionism.
Sure, yeah, perfectionism. And I saw a lot of those in me. And so, and then I saw his website, and I was like, wow, this is, I guess maybe we could have like a barter arrangement, and it's worked out, and I'm so grateful to be here.
It's been so rewarding and so creative, and so much fun to get to know you and to work with you professionally on the fantastic stuff you're creating for the soon to be released new website, but also on a personal level, it's just been fantastic. And you've had such courage and such class and such integrity. It's just mind-blowing.
Appreciate it.
For context, can you just explain a little bit, like give an example or two of what you mean by social anxiety?
Glad you asked, because that's what I was going to go into next.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a good question. So for me, like basically what it means is sometimes when I'm speaking to people, whether it's a friend or someone I know really well, someone I don't really know very well, or even like a boy or a girl I'm attracted to, I'm not attracted to, sometimes I just feel nervous and a bit tense and a bit on edge. And I think a lot of people get this like at the beginning of an interaction, but for me, sometimes it can just last throughout the whole thing. And there isn't an apparent, there isn't something that the other person is doing to make me feel that way. And yeah, so that's sort of like the basic gist.
And like what, I mean, I guess to use David's, I think always a good idea to try and quantify that. On a scale of 0 to 100,
yes.
100 being, want to run out of the room, like how intense is this?
Yeah, good question. So sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's not there at all. And sometimes it's, a lot of the time it's sort of like a 2 or a 3. And then
out of 10 or out of 100?
Out of 10.
Yeah.
Out of 10. Yeah, so 20 or 30 out of 100. And then sometimes it'll go to like a 4 or 5. And then I've had a panic attack once.
I was at 101.
And that was 10 out of 10. I would say that's probably like 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10. But yeah,
it was about as self-conscious as one can get.
Yeah, but for the most part, it's sort of like a 2, 2 or 3. It's certainly inhibited. It's inhibited my relationships in terms of, because sometimes I'll just like avoid, so like I have like it's like a strange setup, because I have a really active social life. I go out a lot. But it's, yeah, sometimes in some situations I'll just feel nervous, and it's definitely hindered connecting with people more deeply, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to like be relaxed.
And I think one of the points many great points that you're hoping to make in today's podcast is that, sometimes when I'm talking about someone and like the treatment with Marilyn, which has been, people have been so touched. Here's someone who just has metastases from stage 4 lung cancer, or metastases to her brain, her bones, her lymph nodes, and how long do I have to live? Have I had a meaningful life? And her depression was as severe as a human being can have. It was 100, and her anxiety was 100, and her rage and anxiety, her rage and anger were 100. And these are very dramatic examples, and I like to use them to show how even people with seemingly impossibly overwhelming problems can be helped, often tremendously and often quickly. But you've made an even more important point, that there's a lot of people listening right now to this podcast who we might say are the walking wounded, or the wounded warriors, who are living what would appear to be extraordinarily successful and effective and productive lives, and yet there's still this thing where you're hurting inside. Is kind of taking you down a little bit, and it can really take the joy out of life. We went last night to eat a Chinese dinner, and as I was turning in to Chef Chu's, which you probably know, this fellow on a bicycle hit the car and fell over, and so we have to, have the car wasn't hurt, but his bicycle, which he thinks, which he describes as a super exotic carbon fiber, super expensive bicycle, he's saying is hurt or injured or something like that. And it makes me very anxious. And it's fun to do the podcast, but every time I remember that, it kind of, but that will be an easily resolved issue. But it's kind of like that there's this thing eating away at you, that you can have such tremendous joy, but then you think, oh, I'm socially anxious, and just kind of like a sprained ankle or something, or like that you did, and it can really take a lot of the joy out of life. And one thing that you were saying that it's hard for people to understand, because if you saw Michael, I mean, he's this very unattractive fellow, and
kind of troll-like.
You say,
he's this tall, handsome, super smart, articulate, with a wonderful British accent.
Yeah, British accent. Yeah.
And Yale graduate and all these things, and yet you say, but even someone like that can be kind of hurting inside sometimes.
Sure, absolutely. And I think a lot of, like as I've opened up to my friends about this, a lot of them are surprised that and some of them don't even believe me that I have this, because, and I think that's like a helpful thing to say, because maybe there's some of you out there who are like that, who, like, you don't come off like you have social anxiety, but you do.
Or some other form of anxiety.
Or anything, yeah.
I've had, as you know, 17 different anxiety disorders.
There you go. And in fact, like, we'll go into this in a little bit later, but part of, as I work with David, he's encouraged me to open up more about it. And yeah, a lot of some friends that I've spoken to, they say, oh yeah, man, me too. And so, so hopefully this podcast can help, because there's been some strategies that we've used that have definitely helped. I'm definitely not at the end of the journey, but there's been a lot of things that have really helped. We can talk about some of those from the Team CBT armory.
Sure. Why don't we talk about the first your first kind of assignment and what happened? When we started working together, I said, man, this guy's pretty high powered. I better come up with something pretty good, or he'll stop working with me. So it put me under a lot of pressure. So why don't you tell them about your first homework assignment?
Sure. So, first homework assignment. Basically, so we had a few. Dave and I had a few sessions. Like, I spoke to him about what I was experiencing, and he's like, okay, so your problem, or one of your problems, is that you are hiding it, that you're not okay with talking about it, and you're not okay with the fact that you have social anxiety. So as an exposure, what I want, which means, for those of you not well versed in the literature, in the CBT sort of vernacular, is kind of like, how would you describe it? Like an exercise designed to face your fear.
Confront your worst fear, yeah.
Okay.
And the idea is to discover that the monster has no teeth, and it's a technique that goes back at least 2,500 years to the time of the Buddha, and it's the basis of Buddhism and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which you can see there on my bookshelf, even though it's a crappy book, but it looks very fancy.
Yeah,
I quote it all the time, but I've never read
it. So he said you're trying to hide it. So I want you to start opening up about it. And at the time, we thought that it was mostly in dating scenarios. Later found out that it was kind of around everyone. But at the time, we thought the anxiety was in dating scenarios. So he's like, okay, so I want you to just go find girls you find really attractive and just tell them on the street that you have social anxiety and you've been trying to hide it, and now up until now, and you're just kind of opening up about it, and like, what do you think about guys that have social anxiety, that kind of a thing. So I went out on my own. I went to Times Square in New York City because there's just a lot of people there. And the first girl that I spoke to.
But by the way, was it easy to go up and approach the first girl?
Oh no, like it was definitely difficult. Yeah, it was difficult. I was just like walking around for a while, just working up the courage to do this, because this is like a fact that I've been hiding from people for a while, and out of fear of judgment, like out of fear of judgment. And
they'll judge you as being less than.
Yeah, weak, less than, that kind of a thing. So I see this like beautiful girl walk past, and I was like, okay, just go do it. I've had enough walking around Times Square. It's cold. I want to go home. And we just have this great chat. And
can you actually walk us through the interaction?
Yeah.
Say that again.
I'd like him to walk us through like what did he say to what was the first thing he said? What was the response?
So I was like, hey, I'm just trying to become a more open person. Sometimes I get anxiety around people, and sometimes it happens with girls I'm attracted to. And I'm just I just want to tell you that, or like I don't remember like the exact verbiage, but it was like, oh, like what do you think of guys who are anxious? Something to that degree. Mm-hmm. And she's like, oh yeah, I think it's like really common.
So was she? I mean, was she walking down the street and you stepped in front of her and talked? Was she stopped? Like
walking?
She was walking.
Well, she walked past me, and I was like, whoa. And then she sort of walked past me, and then I sort of backpedaled and approached her.
So you like went around the block so that you could meet her head on?
No. Yeah, and then I chased after her with an axe, and then I got arrested. It was bad. So Times Square is just like a lot of people milling around. Yeah. It's not like a block. It's just it's like hundreds of people just walking around, street vendors, that kind of thing. So she just walks past me in this crowd of people.
Okay.
And I was like, whoa, she's really cute. And I didn't talk to her, and then I'm like, no, just go do the thing that David told you to do. Just do it. And then so I'm trying to describe it. I mean, she was behind me, and then I turned around and walked over and talked to her.
How are you feeling at this moment?
I mean, pretty nervous, but no, I wouldn't say that the social anxiety was the nervousness. It was just general anxiety. Okay. Of just like, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
But for me, like the actual, like she's walking along and you walk up to the side of her and you're walking with her. You step in front. Like how did you actually?
Okay.
Yeah.
I wish you could see where my hands are going.
Maybe the video would have been good for this.
Yeah, the video would have been good. We could have just done a demonstration.
Right. We could have had a
demonstration. Okay. So I'll try to describe it for the viewers at home. So she walked. I'm walking one way. She's walking the other way to my right, and then she walks past me.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, I need to go talk to her. And then I turn around, walk in front of her, so she sees me.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, hey, excuse me.
And is her first reaction sort of like, who is this crazy person? I want to walk away from you. Like, how did she react to that? And then what was your anxiety at that moment?
Sure. She stopped and just listened to what I had to say.
Do you think it helps David that he has the British accent? Because Times
Square.
Yeah.
Cultivate one. Was that British?
You just kind of got to look at your feet and.
Well, can I just give you credit? I mean, that's Times Square is probably one of the. I would imagine some place where people are on their most guard around.
Yeah, the
top.
Them. So I think I might have said like, I'm not trying to sell you something.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, continue.
But yeah, I guess maybe that's helpful.
Just as an aside, I was telling Michael that once I was in New York with a colleague, and we're going to be on a TV show, and we were dressed up really nice. I said, let's just walk around. Where was it?
You said Rockefeller Center.
Oh yeah, Rockefeller Center, and smile and say hello to 50 people. It's like an anti-shyness technique or an anti-social anxiety technique. So we said, we practice what we preach. We tell patients to do it. So we walked around, took turns, and smiled and said hello to exactly 50 people, and not a single one responded with a smile or a hello. Every one of them ignored it. So this Times Square thing you're doing is kind of major league.
Yeah,
exposure.
Right. That's impressive. Yeah. Okay.
And like the point of the exercise for the people listening, so that if you want to implement something like this, or like follow what David's saying here is the idea is like I'm scared about people judging me, at the time I was just scared about even talking about it to anybody.
That they judge you, they reject you.
Judge me, reject me, that kind of a thing. So the point of the exercise is it's not to like meet girls, it's to reveal these like feelings I'm ashamed about and see that, you know, the world's not going to end.
Or find out if the world ends.
Yeah, exactly.
So did the world end?
Yes. It was really bad. And I've just woken up from my coma. So I did it. And then, she stopped. I tell her that. I tell her I get anxious. And
Adriana, right?
Yeah, we're going to change her name out of respect. Adriana is not her name. But yeah, she's from South America, and so we have this chat, and she's super. She like out of all the people I could have stopped, this woman is just so sweet, so supportive. She's probably like the perfect person to have done this exercise with. Like we did a similar exercise where we just approached guys yesterday, and like one of the guys was like, "Yeah, I'm judging you." And so it's good that I didn't get that one the first time.
What happened?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting there. So we have a chat, and then after I've gone through this spiel, I realized that we're just like having this great conversation. So we exchange contact information, and then I see her a couple of days later, and we have this, and then we just like go from 0 to 60 so quickly, and I've never felt like so connected to a girl so quickly, ever. Like not like the speed with which it happened was like so rapid, and I think that. Like because of how it started, like the beginning of any relationship is often like some game playing and like posturing and hiding things from each other, and you kind of gradually get to know who the other person really is. But because I'd started with like sharing these like really, you know, these very, very personal details about myself, that opened the door for us to be like totally open with each other about everything. And I learned that vulnerability, which is what this is what creates intimacy. Like, and it's being open about the things that, especially about the things that you don't want to be open about, especially the things that you think you're going to be judged for. Like that's the stuff that you got to be the most open about, because that's what helps the other. I think there's a lot of different factors to it, but I think one, it helps you be seen by the other person, because you're like, this is who I am. This is all of who I am, including these parts of myself that I'm ashamed about, and we've all got something like that, and you're seeing me for that, and yet we're still kind of, you know, and we're together, and that's like a beautiful thing, and yeah, I mean the crazy thing with her was that we got so close so fast, and then we spent the next 6 weeks just like talking every day. And I went to visit her in South America. I'm trying to just like leave off the details. And yeah, we had like an amazing week together. Like sadly, like when I got there, it was my feelings had cooled off somehow. Like we won't go into it. And yeah, so like I just wasn't feeling it as much as I was before. But
the love, the attraction, yeah.
The love, yeah. I mean, I was feeling a lot of love. I just wasn't sure if I was
had the right one to marry or whatever.
Well, I know that.
Well, that's what she had in mind, yeah.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, who knows?
I know.
But I think for the listeners, like the thing that I learned through this is being open is like the key. Is a really major key to feeling connected. Like we felt just the connection was like it's out of control. It was out of control, and it was amazing. Like it was this amazing like gift from the heavens that just kind of dropped out of the sky. Like this girl I just met on the street.
And it made me happy too, because I thought, yeah, I think I'm doing a good job, my part in this social anxiety issue.
Clearly you've been playing in the shadows writing these psychotherapy books when really you should have been going after the dating market, David.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So I would, so just to help, because I want to make sure this like really helps people. So this is, I think.
So you're saying our listeners should consider what you're saying right now. What is the key to loving relationships?
Yeah, I think I think one key that I've learned, and I knew this conceptually. There's like vulnerability is kind of like this poppy word right now that it's like a lot of people are talking about it, and I knew that the vulnerability was really important, but this was actually a real hard not hard, but this was like a real life lesson.
Proof.
But proof. It was proof, and it was so cool. And I will be close with this girl forever on some level, and I'm just so grateful for her, and I'm grateful for David, sort of pointing me in that direction.
She was a beautiful person, and
oh my God, like inside and out,
just meshed so beautifully. A couple other just quick points about it is that remember the point of exposure is to find out if the monster has teeth.
yeah, and the monster didn't have any teeth.
Yeah, that was amazing. And then another thing about it that often comes out when I'm treating people with depression or anxiety or whatever, and it's one of the first stories in the book When Panic Attacks. Remember the attorney who thought his colleagues would judge him.
He did a survey.
Yeah, if he ever lost a case in court, he did a survey, and after 60 years of feeling inadequate, secretly inadequate, he was able to get close to people for the first time, and his anxiety disappeared for the first time. You find out that your worst flaw, like in your case that you've been hiding from people, when you accepted it and shared it with others, it turned into the opposite, your greatest source of strength and joy.
Absolutely.
And intimacy.
So I think that's a good jumping off point. So we can keep on. I want to keep talking about like what I've learned through this journey that people can implement in their own journey with social anxiety, and which is like anxiety in general, and probably maybe applies to depression as well, but certainly social anxiety. So lesson number one was like vulnerability. Just be open, and that's like the key to so much. Like so much will come through that. It's difficult to, especially if you've been on the closed side, and especially as I think this is just like an epidemic for men, for a whole variety of reasons. So that's the first one, and then I also learned. And okay, so if we return to like the David's recommendation was to do that, and it was a super helpful exercise. And we had this really cool thing that happened, but like the actual like sharing of it that I had it was helpful, but it didn't like move the needle. That was like one of the first exercises that we tried, and it wasn't like dramatic in terms of like affecting my actual social anxiety. But then one of the things that really did move the needle was learning to share the anxiety when I'm feeling it. So in these exercises, I'm just telling people that I experience social anxiety in the abstract, and I don't think I was like feeling particularly socially anxious at the time, but that's one sort of set of things. But another, what David recommended and I implemented and it worked was if I'm sitting with a friend or I'm at a party or I'm with people, just saying like calling attention to the fact that I'm feeling nervous like right now.
And that was harder for you.
Yeah, that was harder.
And why was that? I mean, that's so true what you're saying, but can you explain that to our listeners, because they can probably identify with that.
Yeah, why was it harder? I mean, number of reasons. Like first off, when you're anxious, your brain's like hijacked, and you can't really think logic. You can't really like behave rationally. You're just kind of in a reactive mode. And then also because if the first homework assignment was, just go tell people that you feel socially anxious in general, and you can kind of just do that with whoever. But if you're trying to just own up to, if you're trying to call attention to the fact that you're feeling anxious in the moment, you have to wait until you are feeling anxious. And for me, it's like sporadic. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes it's bad. Sometimes it's not there. So it's kind of up and down. And I had to catch the moments when I was actually feeling it, and then work up the balls to talk about it. And so that took a little bit of time to be able to like get over that hump. But what I found with that was not all the time, but pretty predictably, it would reduce the nervousness quite a lot. In some cases, it would disappear completely, and then in other cases, it would just go down at kind of to an imperceptible level. And there could be a lot of reasons for why that is. Maybe it's because when it's showing my brain, my brain's fear, I think probably is like, oh, people are going to judge me for having this and feeling this way, or like they're going to look down on me or think I'm weak or something like that. But then if you share it and you see that the world doesn't end, then you then sort of the anxiety disappears.
You're crushing the negative thoughts more effectively.
Yeah.
Because you're having on some level the perception, if people know that I'm anxious right now, then they're gonna, criticize me or reject me or judge me or look down on me, and that's why it's harder to do it when the anxiety is actually there. But again, when you get the opposite result from people, then those perceptions, those thoughts lose their credibility.
Yes.
And the anxiety diminishes.
So this was after it was Ariana, the woman in Times Square. So your social anxiety sounds like romantically things worked out very well. That social anxiety continued, so there was some impact, but you still need to work at it. I'm just, if you can give a sense of
correct.
Like, what has there been a point where you're like, okay, I've finally done this X number of times, and I'm starting to notice a lasting change?
Yeah, these are good questions. So yeah, like the exercise, the Times Square exercise was this like really cool adventure, but it didn't help. It didn't provide like a meaningful change, I don't think, in my social anxiety. What I did notice was that my relationship with, let's call it Adriana, was like I didn't really feel social anxiety with her at all. And it's probably, I found that kind of like vulnerability and connection is like the antidote to anxiety. So because we're having this like constantly open and relationship where I just like could share everything, there was something about that and like this woman was just like unbelievable in terms of she's just so supportive and empathic. And if you're an anxiety sufferer, this could be something that you could look for in partners, or even if you're not, it's pretty amazing, is like how like, are they supportive, are they kind, and like are they like critical, because she was not any of those things. And that
we've another just brief issue there is that there's what you call a low-level solution and a high-level solution.
Right.
Albert Ellis from New York, the fairly famous and I think a bit notorious psychologist. I love the guy. He was pretty wild, but he had a lot of original thinking. He talked about a low-level solution as you find out that your negative thought is not true. It's not true that Adriana is rejecting me, or when I tell other people, they don't seem to be rejecting me. And then the high-level solution is, could I be happy even if someone were rejecting me? And that's a really fun level to attack the thing on. We were doing that a little bit yesterday, actually.
Yeah, no, definitely, 100%. So that's I like looking for someone who's like really empathic and kind is amazing. So it feels like we're almost out of time.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that I just share like some of these things that have helped me, so that everyone can implement that themselves. So definitely sharing it when you're feeling it. And I want to talk a little bit about like how to do that if we can.
Yeah, you can. I think you were saying it's important if people are going to be opening up about their vulnerabilities, that you can do it in a skillful way that's likely to lead to good feedback from other people, or in kind of an unskillful way. Sometimes these techniques sound simple, but they're a little more subtle and sophisticated than it might at first appear. And one thing I like about you is the way your brain works is you're able to conceptualize these things really, really well. So what would be some of the issues there?
Yeah, so, excuse me, I've learned what you have to do. Say you're going to like share that you're feeling anxious. The key principles here is like, are you sharing it from a way that's needy, or are you share it and like that like need something from the other person, or are you sharing it in a way that's just, you know, you talking about it and you don't really mind what their reaction is, you're just kind of sharing it to share it? Because the former leads to poor outcomes and the latter leads to amazing outcomes. So if you're going to share something and you're like, oh, like I really hope that you don't reject me, but yeah, I'm feeling like kind of anxious, and oh man, it's the worst, or something like that.
I'm feeling so anxious, I fear rejection. Please don't reject me.
Yeah. Or
that would be the needy way.
Whether you say that or come across like that.
Or come across like, I say it exaggerated, but it's easy to come across that way.
And but instead, if you could say something like, yeah, like sometimes I start to feel a little bit anxious when I'm speaking to people, and I'm actually feeling that way right now. And you don't seem like you suffer from that kind of a thing. You seem pretty confident and relaxed, and just wondering if you ever have an experience like that. And so the key elements there are, you're just saying it, you're not making a big deal out of it, you're drawing attention to it, and then the important thing is you involve the other person at the end, because it's if you just say like, oh, I'm feeling anxious, then it's like, what the hell does the other person do? Then like they'll try to comfort you, or they'll just feel awkward. But if you end with a question and a little compliment, ideally, then the other person is invited in. You kind of give them a trajectory to respond to you.
Can we just model this?
The other person, what?
I was going to ask, can we just model this? I mean, should we actually do, rather than being abstract about it?
I was thinking if we had time, we could do a feared fantasy too, and say, you know, if someone were to reject me, does that need to upset me?
And I just want to give you like the possible outcome for the listeners at home, like, because I want to model it. The really cool thing with this is not just that it will help with your anxiety, but it will lead to these like amazing conversations with other people, because what you're doing is you're giving them this gift of vulnerability where you're opening up about something that's really personal, and they'll see that, and then they'll feel like safe to be really open with you. And the number of amazing connected conversations I've had as a result of sharing my own like shameful things that I'm ashamed about is unbelievable, and I like highly recommend you trying this out.
Thank you so much for taking this giant step and sharing your wonderful self with the world, and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll bring this podcast with maybe we should title it David Byrne's Dating Pickup Strategies and Porn.
Right. Get more listeners.
That one will do well. Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Byrne's website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this episode under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. The theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donsel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.